Dr. Walter Rodney was a great historian. He was also an intellectual revolutionary. In Walter Rodney Speaks, he said, "I've always made the point that one's political contribution should come out of one's principal work activity, whatever that happens to be. My principal work activity is law. This is my small political contribution. I will show why Guyana's exploitative deal with ExxonMobil's subsidiary and partners is neo-colonial. Then I will focus on the World Bank as a neo-colonial institution promoting a neo-colonial governance project. The project does various things. I'm going to look at one aspect, which is the attempt to burden Guyana with the unwanted associated gas. This neo-colonial exploitation is facilitated by what Dr. Walter Rodney called the agents or unwitting accomplices of the neo-colonial system. In December 2019, ExxonMobil said it had produced oil from the Liza Phase 1 development. Guyana officially became an oil producer. Guyana's petroleum development is a classic neo-colonial project that benefits the oil companies, not Guyana. Oil companies are rich because they exploit developing countries. Guyana owns the oil. The oil companies, Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited, Hess Guyana Exploration Limited, and CNOOC Nexen Petroleum Guyana Limited, take 87.5% of the oil that is produced. They don't pay Guyana for this oil. Guyana gets what is left, the remaining 12.5%, and pays somebody to collect it and sell it. The oil companies don't pay a royalty except on oil sold, and the rate is 2%. They pay no tax, they pay no duties. The minister said they could recover pre-contract costs, which rack up to about $1 billion. So the government's attempt to make money from oil has cost the Guyanese people at least $1 billion. The environmental permit for this Liza 1 says Esso can discharge 4,000 barrels of sewage into Guyana's ocean every day. Over the proposed life of Liza 1, that is about 1.4 billion gallons of sewage. Liza 1 has about 1.4 billion barrels of recoverable oil. So Guyana gets roughly a gallon of sewage for every barrel of oil in Liza 1. That tells you what they think about Guyana and the Guyanese people. The International Development Association is part of the World Bank Group. It lent Guyana $20 million to improve governance in the oil and gas sector. That looks helpful given the disastrous deal with Esso, Hess, and CNOOC Nexen. Look more closely. The World Bank is not a benevolent institution. It is not a neutral technical entity. It is a neo-colonial body. It is an international organization set up by treaty under international law. Where did international law come from? From the conflict between colonizing European powers and the colonized. International law justified the conquest, enslavement, torture, and killing of non-Europeans, and the theft of their lands and natural resources. Decolonization has not removed the economic structures that colonization put in place. Developed countries always take developing countries' resources as cheaply as possible. That's why developed countries are rich and developing countries remain poor. The World Bank is controlled by the developed countries. When IDA lends money, IDA acquires power to tell a borrower state how to develop. Guyana wants to replace its heavy fuel oil with 100% renewable energy. Guyana said so in its contribution under the Paris Agreement. Does IDA lend Guyana money to move to renewable energy? No. IDA's loan is to promote oil and gas and to get Guyana to take the unwanted associated gas. Associated gas is a worthless product. Countries routinely flare it because nobody will buy it. IDA says it will help Guyana to prohibit routine flaring. IDA wants Guyana to join the World Bank's Zero Gas Flaring Initiative. Don't be fooled. This initiative doesn't mean zero flaring. It actually allows routine gas flaring until 2030. So if Guyana joins the World Bank initiative, ESSO would get to flare gas until 2030. Problem. ESSO's environmental permit already prohibits routine flaring. So under Guyana's legal regime, ESSO cannot do routine flaring. So IDA says, change the law. That is direct political interference in Guyana. Who was hired in 2019 to draft the law? A firm by the name of Hunt and Andrews Kurth. The international press say that this firm have been ExxonMobil's lawyers for over 40 years. It seems that Hunt and Andrews Kurth also has some sort of relationship with the World Bank. Their website boasts that when the World Bank wants international legal advice for African governments, the World Bank most often turns to Hunt and Andrews Kurth. Guyanese citizens wrote to the president of the World Bank asking how this firm could hold Guyana's interests paramount if they apparently wanted to be the World Bank's preferred choice of law firm. The World Bank has not responded, but an article in the Guyana press last week says that the firm has now withdrawn. In How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Dr. Rodney pointed out that underdeveloped countries recruit foreign experts at fantastic cost. The IDA project allocated 437 million Guyana dollars for the law firm to draft some new laws. In comparison, Guyana's budget allocated 456 million for the Attorney General's chambers for the whole of 2019 to do all the legal drafting in Guyana, plus all government litigation and legal advice. Under this neo-colonial arrangement, a foreign law firm was going to get almost as much as the AG's chambers to do a fraction of the work. Now, flaring is dangerous. It emits greenhouse gases that make the earth hotter, disrupts the climate system, makes the oceans more acid, and makes sea levels rise. Not good when your capital city is below sea level. IDA claims they will help Guyana to cut emissions from the flaring by using the associated gas as a transition fuel. So IDA creates this problem of flaring, because ESSO isn't allowed to flare at the moment. Then IDA solves it by burdening Guyana with the unwanted associated gas. Gas pipelines and infrastructure cost millions of dollars. Guyana would be locked into natural gas for 20 years. Why can't Guyana use the money instead to give everybody cheap, reliable energy, including the Amerindian communities in the interior? Natural gas is not a bridge fuel. It's bad for the environment compared to any fuel, really, but compared to the renewable energy that Guyana wants to use. Why does IDA want Guyana to take the associated gas? ESSO is legally required to re-inject the associated gas. In the last few weeks, Guyanese have been outraged to hear that ESSO is not re-injecting that gas. They flared over 9 billion cubic feet since starting production in December, and they're flaring millions of cubic feet every day. They say they have a technical problem. If Guyana does what IDA wants and takes the associated gas, obviously the costs move from ESSO to Guyana. Problem. A World Bank report says that Guyana has little or no domestic market for gas. IDA already knows that the Guyanese people could end up paying for gas that they cannot use. They don't care. The World Bank supported a gas project in Ghana. Last year, Ghana's bill for unused gas from an offshore gas field was $250 million US. Dr. Rodney says, racism, violence, and brutality were the concomitants of the capitalist system when it extended itself abroad in the early centuries of the international trade. Racism, violence, and brutality continue today. In another project supported by the World Bank, communities in Mozambique were supposed to leave their ancestral lands so gas infrastructure could be built. Some communities didn't leave and were attacked. Around 700 people have reportedly been killed. In the United States, the murder of George Floyd is a heartbreaking tragedy that has come out of systemic racism, violence, and brutality against Africans for more than 400 years. It's more than enough. Dr. Rodney said that oppression follows logically from exploitation, so as to guarantee the latter. Will the Guyanese people heed the warning from Guyana's own brilliant intellectual revolutionary? Why cling to false promises of wealth and false hopes of getting ExxonMobil to renegotiate? When you have exploitation, the next step is oppression. The exploitation is facilitated by the agents and unwitting accomplices of neocolonialism that Dr. Rodney warned about, people in Guyana who promote and defend this neocolonial venture. For example, the minister who signed the 2016 Petroleum Agreement with the abusive and exploitative terms. The individual who signed the World Bank Loan Agreement in April 2019 as Minister of Finance, when constitutionally he stopped being Minister of Finance after the no-confidence motion in December 2018. The former advisor to the president on petroleum, who told the Guyanese people to trust the oil companies, who was in the press pushing for Guyana to take the associated gas, and even says, myself and the IDB were pushing for a comprehensive feasibility study of the whole coastline so as to pick the best location for the landing of the pipeline on shore. Must Guyana's sustainable development and the future of its young people be sabotaged for a pipe dream to benefit oil companies? The agents and accomplices would reduce Guyana to a supplier of raw materials, oil, and a consumer of unwanted associated gas. In true neo-colonial style, the financial power of the developed countries is being used to get Guyana's resources cheap and fast, leaving Guyana with unwanted gas and sewage. But Guyana has an alternative future. Developed countries are rich because their oil-fueled development has locked the Earth into dangerous global warming. Now they must repair that damage. There is no carbon budget. Developed countries must not buy oil from Guyana's exploitative oil deal. They must pay Guyana to leave the oil 2 miles below the seabed. Guyana is a carbon sink. Pay Guyana for every net ton of greenhouse gas that Guyana takes out of the atmosphere. The Earth faces human-induced mass extermination of biodiversity. Pay Guyana to conserve and protect the marine life in Guyana's ocean, which is threatened by oil production. When Guyana's people, and Guyana's resources are respected and valued, then we will know that neo-colonial exploitation is coming to an end. Thank you.